Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is our webinar on animal facility management with enos software. So we have a great group of people joining us from all over the world, on the east side all the way from Singapore. It's very late over there, and in the US on the way to the US West Coast. I am Eric Ryu. I'm a head of sales and marketing at Brain & Software International, and I'll be your host today. Thank you again for making the time. Our speaker today is my colleague, Matt Sanderson. So Matt has joined us 2.5 years ago. He's in charge of client implementation and training. Before joining us, Matt worked in lab animal science, all the way from being an animal technician to managing animal facilities in different environments in academia and pharma and CROs. In his current role, Matt ensures that our customers get good support from start to finish and ongoing support afterwards. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Eric. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar. During today's webinar, we are going to give you a general overview of the enos software, showing you some of the key features that you might find of benefit in your facility. We're not going to go into a great lot of detail about every single feature within the software. So if you do see anything that you think might be of interest to you, please get in touch with us and we'd be delighted to set up a session with you to go over those areas in more detail. I'm now going to share with you a live demonstration of the enos software. So the enos software can be hosted on the cloud, and the benefit of hosting it on the cloud is that you can access the software from wherever you need to. So whether that's working from your office, from within your facility, or from home, you can access your data in real time. Everyone that has access to the enos software is given their own unique username and password. Now, the benefit of that is that you can control their access level to only give them access to the menus and the functionality of the software that they need for their everyday role. One of the other benefits of that within the enos software is that everybody can have their own unique dashboard, which is what you see in front of you now. The dashboard consists of a series of different widgets that are there to show you the really important pieces of information that you want to see every time you log onto the software. So for example, on the screen that I've got in front of me here, if you were an administrator within your group and you were looking at what animals needed to be ordered for your facility, you could use the awaiting requests widget, which shows you what species you need to order, the quantity, when you expect them to be delivered, and what supplier you need to get them from. You also might be interested in the skills booklet or trainings widget to show what training records need to be reviewed. If you're a member of the IACUC team, you might be interested in looking at what projects you have within your facility that are due for renewal, or you might be interested in looking at a real-time census of the number of animals that are currently in use on those projects. You may also be interested to know in real time how many animals you have in a specific building, or particularly how many animals you have on site or available to be shipped. If you work at one of the larger establishments which has multiple sites, within the enos software, you can have multiple different workspaces. The beauty of having multiple different workspaces is it allows you to use different terminology and different processes between the different facilities, or you can standardize the terminology that you're using across all of your sites. The choice really is yours in how you use the enos software. Our aim within the software is that any terminology that you are currently using will be replicated within the software. So now that I've switched my workspace, you will see that I now have a different dashboard with different widgets showing in front of me, but I also have a more extensive menu system down the left-hand side of my screen. And we'll go into more details in some of those menu items as we progress through the webinar. So this dashboard that you see in front of you now may be more appropriate to an end user or an animal care technician within your team who are using the software. So for example, here the widget we have is showing me all of the animals in my facility that currently have diarrhea. So not only do I have a list of all of the animals, I can see what project they're associated to, their sex, their current age, and also their pens and their current treatments. All of which the columns of information that I'm showing in my widget can be configured by the user. Again, we only want to see the information that you deem important to you. Some of the other widgets that I have on my screen here are cage alerts. So I can see that I have cages that are due to be changed, any filters that need to be changed, any issues with any of those cages within my facility, I can see on my dashboard at a glance. I can also use alerts on animals as well. So I can inform my whole team that I have animals that are particularly slow moving, animals that are fighting, or animals that have been sedated or with wounds. Now, any of the alerts that are used within the system, again, are configured by you and can be used for whatever purpose you wish. So whether that is for identifying fighting animals or cages that need to be changed, the choice is yours, and how you use them will be discussed with you as part of the analysis and implementation process when you decide to use the software. Some of the other widgets that you can see on my dashboard here are specific counters, again, much like you saw on the previous screen. But also I have my notifications, because from within the software, we can automatically create notifications to members within the team to tell them important information. And I'll show you a bit later how we're going to go ahead and create those notifications. But if you don't read your notification, the enos software will automatically email you to tell you there is a notification within the software that you need to view. The last widget that I have on my screen here is my tasks to be completed, because from within the software, I can plan what activities I need to do each day, or I can plan them for my team. So on the example you see in front of me, today I have to do some physical exams. Here are the list of animals that I need to do them on. I also need to do some sampling on the same group of animals, but I also need to clean out a rack in room 1, and the item showing in red below is identified in red because it's a filter change that I need to perform on the rack, but I should have done that filter change on the 2nd of December. So even if the activity is not completed, it will still show on my dashboard until I complete it. When I'm ready to complete the activity, I can execute the activity directly from my dashboard, and the information that's already been entered is drawn through, and I can directly complete my activity from this screen here. So for this activity, I'm going to say I did a urine sample. I enter the volume that I've collected and the reason why I've taken the sample. Apply that to all of my animals at the same time. Then I can validate my activity, and the fact that I've completed this urine sample will be saved on the animal record. You also have the option to notify, as we talked about earlier. The way we can notify people within our team is from the activity. We can either send that notification to a single person within our team, or we can notify a whole group of people from our team, and they will all receive the same notification to say that I have now completed the urine analysis of those animals. So I'm now going to show you a way of looking at different facilities, because we know that every facility is unique. So the way that each facility is configured within the enos software is also unique. As part of the analysis of your facility, and before you start using the software, we look at how your facility is configured and we replicate that within the enos software. So within your facility, you might have different buildings. So on this example here, you will see we have different buildings. And within each building, we may have different floors. Within those floors, we might have defined different areas or different rooms. And then within each room, we may have racks. For those of you that are working with larger species, I will show you how we do configure it slightly different for larger species. And you can have a combination of all of those different combinations, much like your facility could look like now. Within each of those areas within our facility, we may want a real-time census on the information that is in that area. So on this example here, my rack 1 that's within room 1, I can see that I have 32 cages currently occupied out of 37 that are available on my rack. I also have 731 animals currently on that rack and 3 litters. So again, I can do a real-time census of every single rack within my facility. I can also put those counters on different levels. So for example, I can have a counter on a whole floor or on a whole building level to show how many animals I've got in total in my building at any one time. If I then want to interact with any of this information, I can directly interact with that. And as you will see, a new blade opens up within my screen showing more information on the rack. If I want to perform an activity on this rack, for example, I want to clean out this rack and record on the record that the rack has been cleaned, I'm presented with a list of activities. And my list of activities is configured for each person within the team to only show the activities that they need. So for example, my list of activities here might include cleaning, filter changing, or recording data such as temperature, lighting, humidity, or pressure within the rack or the room. From an end user or animal caretaker perspective, we can also present a rack view. And because we have the benefit of the blades within the software, we can minimize the screen to only show the blade that we're interested in. When we are looking at the rack view, which is what you see in front of you, we're presented with a visualization, a visual representation of being stood in front of the rack as if we were in the animal room. So the rack that you can see on my screen here is actually a 80 cage Techniplast IVC rack. Now, from our perspective, if you work with an Allentown rack or an Alt Design or Techniplast rack, whether they're 60 cages, 32 cages, double-sided 160 cage racks, we can handle all of those different configurations in the enos software. Even if you have multiple different manufacturers of racks, multiple different sizes of racks within your facility, those can all be handled within the software and placed into the appropriate rooms that you need them, or even moved between rooms as you rearrange your facility. When we're looking at the rack view that we have in front of us, each square on the rack view represents an individual cage. Much like your facility may operate, for certain studies, you may name each of the cages. So for example, my first 10 cages on my top left-hand screen are numbered cages 1 to 10, but I may want to name them using a particular reference that is used to identify a mating that is in that cage. Or if you don't identify your cages with individual names, you can also use our own unique reference number, which is assigned to every cage within the software. Each cage also presents you with more information on the number of animals that are in that cage, the number of litters that are in the cage, but also we show you how many males, how many females, or how many unsexed animals are in the cage as well. In the bottom left-hand corner, we also give you a visual tag, which, much like some of you may well put stickers onto your cage cards to represent that a cage needs weaning, is the animals in that cage are prone to fighting. We can also do that within the software as well. And the colours that you use for these stickers are set to be the same colours and the same terminology that you're using now that you're currently using in your facility, so that we standardise how you work. You can also apply multiple different stickers to the same cage to show multiple things within that cage. If you need to print your cage cards from the software, you can either select one cage, you might want to select a whole row, or you could select the whole rack to print. For my example here, I'm going to select the top row of cages. I can then select from my label printer which template I want to print, because for most facilities they will have a range of different labels that they have in use. So whether that's experimental labels, breeding labels, or stock labels, they're all designed with you on the software. If you ever need to change any of that information that's presented on the label, you have the control to do that from the software yourselves. The software will print on any printers that you have connected to your computer, so you do not have to buy new hardware to print specific labels that are assigned by us within the software. So to give you an example of what the labels can look like, here's some examples. So on the examples here, we have the sex showing in the top right-hand corner. We've got those stickers showing on the label as well. It may be that you want to include your corporate logo on the label, along with the usual information that you would put there, such as the strain, the number of animals, or the ages. We can then also incorporate QR codes or barcodes onto the labels so that you can quickly scan your cage and bring up information of the cage or the animals that are housed within. And you'll see how we could potentially use those as we go further on through the webinar. So very much like you would in your facility, if you need to move a cage within the software, we literally pick it up and we move it, and we can move multiple cages to whatever location we want. If we want to move animals, we can also do the same. We pick up the animals and we move them to the cage that we want to put them in. Now you will see this cage that I've got on my screen here is now currently highlighted in red because we have a capacity limit set for that cage. So we know that we've exceeded the capacity, and the software will highlight that we've exceeded our allowed capacity of that cage. Just to give us another warning as we go through and we're moving animals within the software. So now to just show you how the software could be configured if you're using some of the larger species, I'm going to show you the example that I have here of my NHP holding area. So again, I can see the capacity, so I can see how many cages I currently got occupied out of how many are available, and I can also see what animals I have currently in that space. And the pen naming structure that we have here, pens 11 to 20, again, the pens are named using your nomenclature that you currently use. so that people understand the terms that are in use within the software. So within my NHP holding area, I've currently got 7 animals. Within Pen 11, I've got 4 animals. And you'll see on the screen in front, I've got a series of different names for my different animals. So in your facility, if you name your animals with particular names, whether you're using the tattoo that is given to the animal from the supplier or the ear tag that is associated to the animal, whether you have a very particular naming structure that you already use within your facility to identify the animals, or you use a study animal ID, the choice is yours, and the software can handle that as well, in addition to our unique ID that is assigned to every single animal. You also have the flexibility within the software to use a series of different IDs for the same animal. So for example, if researchers like to refer to those animals via their study ID, whereas the animal care staff refer to them as their tattoo number, the animal record within the enos software will collate all of that information together and present that all in one place on the same animal. We can also see on our tree view here those visual alerts again, so those coloured stickers that we were using on our rack view can also be used on our pen view here as well to show that additional information. So my example here is this animal has been previously sedated and it's already had the maximum allowed amount of blood taken for it. So anybody that sees the animal here will know that this animal cannot be bled again in the future until that visual alert is removed from the animal. If we want to view more information on a single animal, we can open up the individual animal record. The information that you see at the top of the display on the header again is configured to show what information you deem important every time you open up the animal record. So on my record here, I'm showing the name that's been given to the animal along with the tattoo associated to it, the species, the location, its age in months, but I'm also showing things such as its cage reference, its current cage mates, or any matings, or any custom information that I want to associate it to that animal as well. If I'm interested in knowing more about the history of that animal and everything that's ever happened to it, I can look at the animal's events. When I'm looking at the animal events, I can see every activity that has been performed on the animal over its lifetime. So of interest for anybody that's doing imaging or taking photographs of their animals, you can also attach photographs or images such as X-rays to the animal record as well. So it's all stored in one place. We can also see when the animal's been moved. We can see things such as observations and any body weight activities that have been performed on the animal. Now, as you can see here, I've got a series of different weights that have been applied to the animal. When you're weighing the animal, the individual body weight sometimes isn't relevant. What we're more interested in is looking at how the animal is progressing in the body weight curve. So the software can automatically present to us the growth chart of that animal so we can see to make sure it's progressing the way that we want it to. We also have a series of different activities where you can reference the weight from day one of the study, so we can look at how the body weight is graphed from day one of the study as well and see how it's progressing from there. Very topical at the minute is the cage mate, because from within the software, we can also identify any single animal that this particular animal has come into contact with over its life. So very much with contact tracing at the minute, we can see for this animal who it's been in contact with. So if it has an infection, we can track back and see every location that it's been into or every animal that it has come into contact with over its lifetime. And we've got that information for every single animal within the software. You also have the option to print or export any of your animal records within the software using the format that you so wish. And those records can also show your corporate logos, your addresses, any information that you need on that record. So I'm now going to show you how we would handle an animal entry from within the software. So for example, we've received our animals from the supplier. We're going to create a new entry into the software. So we enter the day that we receive the animals, the species that we're receiving, and the number. And for this example, my supplier, whether it's a commercial supplier or an academic institute, has supplied me with an Excel file of all of the information on the animals. So I can drag that into the software. And that information is already directly imported from the Excel file into enos. So I no longer have to transcribe the animal's IDs, the sexes, the date of birth. I've already got the body weights. I just need to add the unit on because it was missing from my file. I can see what pen, what project, and what supplier these animals came from. But whatever information you receive from your supplier, we can directly import into the software as well. And all we need to do is validate that information. The software will all do some checks in the background, and those animals will then be housed in the correct cages straight away. We will be asked to confirm the information as we're going, and then we'll see as we progress, we have our multitask sidebar appears. While this is there, it means we can progress and do other things within the software. And when it's finished, it will show that our process is complete. If I then take you back to our location, you will now see the additional animals are present here. We now show that we have 16 animals. We have 4 of our pens that are now occupied. And when we look at pen 14, we can see our additional animals are already there. From this view here as well, much like we did with the rack view that you saw earlier, if we do need to move animals, we can select the ones that we need to move. We drag them to where we want to go, and straight away, we've got an update on our census. We save the information, and then on those animal records, it will show that those animals are now in a new location. And again, we'll be tracking all of that cage mate history and showing who they've come into contact with. So when we're talking about all of your animals that are in your facility, the animals are generally assigned to a project. So again, within the enos software, we also have the capability to manage all of our projects within the software. So from our project or protocol menu, you will see a list of protocols that are available to you, not only showing the titles or the reference numbers, we can also show additional information, such as when it was started, the duration, who is responsible for that project, the species, but more importantly, we can also show how many animals are approved on the project, and we have real-time totals and real-time percentages of how many animals are assigned to that protocol and how many have been used. So that from an IACUC perspective or an ethics committee perspective, you can see and make sure that all of those projects are in line with their allowed limits. If you want to view more information on a particular protocol, you can use the details and see more information. So for this example here, we can see what committee approved the ethics. We can also see the dates of that approval and any reference numbers that were given to it. We can also see all of the people that are responsible for that project, whether it's the manager, the researcher, or the technician that is responsible for it. We then also have the option to attach any documentation that you want people that are working on this project to see, whether that's an original copy of the protocol and how it was approved, or it could be an observation checklist that needs to be attached so people know how they're observing the animals. You can attach any documentation that you need at this point here as well. If we scroll over to the right of our screen, we can also view further information. So for example, we can see all of the animals that are active on this project using the active animal screen. And from here, we're then presented with a list of all of the animals that are currently on that project. And from here, we have the option to either transfer them to a different project, we can reassign, we can end their project. We also have the option to request work is done on those animals. And you'll see when we move on slightly later to our activity assistant, some of the activities that you might want to request or plan on your animals. So if you know who's going to be doing it, you can use the plan activity, or if it's you that's performing those activities, you can perform all of that directly from this screen here. You also have the option within the software to print or export any of the data that is within the software from multiple points within it. So for example, if you need to export the data that's recorded within enos into another piece of software to do further analysis or manipulation of it, you do have that capability as well. Also from within the project menu, you can view a list of all of the animals that were part of the project that have now been euthanized or transferred to another project. You can look at all the people that are allowed to work on the project. You can also do things such as if you have a retrospective review, you can attach all of that retrospective review documentation to the details here as well. And you have the capability to do billing or invoicing on projects or animals from within the software as well. So that's all well and good if you know what project the animals are on. But as an example, if a researcher comes to you and asks you how many animals you've got available of a certain strain or species, you can also search for that within the software as well. So for example, a researcher comes to you and asks you, how many SD rats do you have available for them to use currently in your facility? We can query that information straight within the software. And the queries that are available to you are all configured with you in mind. So if you tell us how you want to search for animals, we'll help you configure them and produce for you the list of queries that you can search for. So going back to my example, my researcher wants to know how many SD rats we have available. I select my query, I can then execute it, and the software will tell me straight away how many animals I've got that match that criteria. Now that could be looking at a series of different dates of births, a range of body weights. It could be that we're looking for all of the animals that have certain physical exam findings or behavioural observations, all of which the list can be compiled using a query search. And again, much like we saw from our project screen, we have the ability to request activities are performed on these animals. We can plan what activities need to be performed, or we can perform those activities directly ourselves from the screen. And again, we have the option to print or export any of that information that we have on display. You also have the option to change what columns of information you wish to show. So my example here again is showing the project, the date of birth, and also their current cage. But if I wanted to see their last body weight or their current treatment, or I wanted to see any of those properties, I wanted to see a list of all of their cage mates, I can do all of that on the screen that I have in front of me. So just to show you another way of searching for your animals, very much like in Microsoft Outlook, you now have a global search bar at the top of your display. In enos, we also have the same. So if your animals are microchipped or your cage labels have a barcode or a QR code, you can scan that animal or that cage card and it will show you the information of the animal. Or, for example, you can manually type in the animal's ID and it will show you the animal's ID. If you're looking for a particular cage, it will show you those cage IDs. Or if you're looking for a particular litter that needs to be weaned, you can bring up a list of litters that match your criteria and then access those records from that screen here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to give you a live demonstration of our new activity assistant. With the activity assistant, you have the option to do a step-by-step process for all of the activities on your animal. So from within the software, we would select our activity assistant icon, which then asks us which of the activities we want to perform on the animal. So we have the option to select one of the approximately 150 different activities that we have available to you, or you can use a predetermined template that you have created within the software for you or your team. So the example that we're going to show you now, we're going to weigh our animals, we're going to do a tumor measurement on those animals, and you'll see how the software will step us through that process. Because our animal is microchipped, we're going to scan our animal, and the ID of the animal is taken directly from the chip reader into the software. It then asks us to enter the body weight. So we place our animal onto the balance. We transfer the weight directly from the balance into enos. It then asks us to take our tumor measurements. So we take the measurement with our caliper. And again, the data is transferred directly from our caliper into the software. It will then move us on to our next animal. So we repeat the process. We scan our animal. We weigh the animal. We take our tumor measurements. And the volume of the tumor is automatically calculated for us when the measurements are taken. Before we finish, it asks us to review all of the information on those animals. And then we can save and validate that information. All of which is done completely hands-free, so the technician is able to concentrate on the animals and not on the software, because all of our devices are directly transferring that data to the enos software. So I hope you can see that using the activity assistant will really benefit in stepping you through those processes and helping you work through what needs to be done on your animals. I'm now going to bring you back to my area of enos and just talk you through a few of the additional features that we do have available to you within the enos software. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail on each area. So again, if you see an area that you think would be of interest to you, please let us know and we will go through that in more information. So when we're looking at the animals, we can also do things such as the procurement and manage all of the procurement of your animals from within the software, whether that's you have researchers that have to request animals before they're used, whether as an administrator, you're the one that's responsible for generating those orders, or whether as an animal care technician, you're the one that is receiving the animals or the deliveries, you can handle that within the software as well. For any of you that are breeding, we can handle any production target, matings, parturitions, and also give you all of that history of those animals, where they've been produced and who their offspring is. We can control all of that within the software. And for those of you that are shipping animals to other facilities, we can manage all of your reservations and all of your shipments from within the software. And we can also manage some of that documentation that you might need to produce. So, for example, things such as the 70/20 documentation, we can automatically populate that detail and that report in the software, so you don't have to do any transcription of that information. Other areas that you might want to manage within the software are things such as your staff training records. This can also be managed so you can have an overview of all of the skills. You can look at making a record of all the continued professional development of all of your teams to make sure they're staying up to date with their education requirements. We can also manage any bookings that you have. So for example, if you have procedural rooms within your facility that researchers need to book before they're allowed to use those areas, you can control and manage all of that process and approve or reject any of those bookings from within the software. Again, sending notifications back to the person that booked them directly from within the software. We can also do other activities such as managing all of your drugs and consumables from within the software so that you can see what consumables or drugs you have available, when they are due to expire, or quantity alerts you need within the software. All of which can be tailored to you, so if you are not using these features, they will not show on your menu item. But if you do want to have them visible again, please get in touch and we can add them back into your platform and make them available for you. And as we talked about using the activity assistant, we can also do all of your devices. We can manage how they're connected to the computer. We can manage the maintenance and any calibration that you need to record on those devices directly from within the software as well. So I hope you can see that Enos itself has a lot of benefit in terms of how you manage your facility. And you can really see how things such as the activity assistant, the global search bar, or the query search function, and the different ways that we can configure your locations to suit how you're working now can be of real benefit to you. As I said, if you do require further information, please get in touch and we'd be delighted to show you.